entrepreneurs? Like, where does that come from?
Honestly, it was definitely a lockdown project. Yeah. I think a lot of people just found themselves stuck in their room for a long time. And it was something that I wanted to do for quite a while. And so I thought this is like the perfect time to do it because everyone's suddenly on Zoom all day anyways. And yeah, it's been going pretty well. I've interviewed some pretty cool people and the response has been really great. So yeah, thank you so much for doing this. So yeah, I've just got a few questions because I mean, obviously I came across you on LinkedIn and you've done some really, really awesome stuff. So could you just like tell me a bit about yourself and how you got to starting all of these crazy companies?
Okay, cool. So is this a go now? Like we're live?
This is a go, yeah, but I'll definitely edit it post. Yeah. So if there's any mistakes or anything, it's totally cool.
Awesome. So I guess I haven't had to answer the tell me about yourself question in a bit. But I've been on the asking end of that, I would say. But it's been a crazy few years, I would say. So entrepreneurship is not something that comes to me by blood or anything like that. It's not something that I've always wanted to do. I've never dreamt of Elon Musk in my sleep or anything like that. It's just that I guess 3 years ago, I had a bit of an academic setback, I guess. And that sort of gave me the pause to sort of reflect on what I really wanted to achieve out of my career, my life. And I don't think most people on 3-year degrees typically get to do that a lot because it's just go, 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 apply to this, apply to that, and like get into investment banking, consulting, and then that's just how it goes. And you can't really blame them, to be honest. But I was lucky enough to have that opportunity to take some time for myself and really figure out what I wanted to do. And initially that was sort of giving back and just, trying to help other people sort of get to these places that we were so lucky to get to, and being able to give them the tools to sort of reach the same places. And by that, I mean like going to LSE and things like that has been, such an honor. So I just wanted to help other people afford the same privilege. And I did that by working with a nonprofit called Project Access International, set up their India division. And that's sort of my entry point into startups. And post that, essentially did a failed sustainable fashion project where I made a lot of mistakes. But then, it was really an interesting angle to explore. Looking at me now, you're probably like, yeah, it's probably good you didn't do the fashion thing. Yeah, you're not like the best at it. But post that, again, like ReShape Co, that started out in June 2020, where we sort of jumped in when businesses were struggling, even though we weren't really consulting experts by any means, but just sort of a bunch of young people who wanted to help out, who were creative enough to do whatever it took to sort of help them out. We helped about 40 companies and had about 210 people on our team at the sort of peak of the pandemic, I would say. And that was really interesting because you sort of deal with all sorts of people, I would say, coming from all sort of different circumstances that you've never seen before. People's families testing positive for COVID. And as a leader, I think that's a lot more different than you think it might be when you hear one of your friends testing positive. So definitely a whole other, topic to dive into for sure. And now, finally, sorry for this really elongated resume run through. I'm working on a tokenized social media platform for entrepreneurs, essentially, where we're sort of trying to capture the early stage value chain of entrepreneurs and really tokenize experiences and contributions by experts in the startup ecosystem so that founders like myself don't have to rely on the altruism of people who are, sort of industry experts, so that we can sort of avoid as many mistakes as possible. And yeah, that's just sort of like a basic rundown of what we're doing so far.
Awesome. So did you graduate this year or last year? This year. Okay, cool. So you graduated from LSE. So you had like a couple internships, I think at PwC and Emirates and places like that. Yeah. Like you mentioned earlier that you didn't always see yourself as an entrepreneur. Like, how did that come about, and why didn't you like go down the corporate route?
Yeah. So for context, my family is into financial services, so banking and things like that come very naturally to me. And in fact, it's probably the go-to thing that I came to LSE with. I did have some experiences with Big Four and sort of like commercial banks out here in the UAE. And was probably and for the longest time was trying to get into investment banking, I guess, in the UK as well. But I just thought to myself, like I said, like I got an opportunity to pause. You're working 100 plus hours a week, and why? And for whose dream? And, all of these things that you don't really get to sort of ask yourselves when you're just rushing through uni life. So like I said, an academic setback that sort of gave me some time to really just think about, all of the choices that I'm making and like consciously choosing to live this life that is able to impact a lot more people than myself, I guess is sort of what led me to entrepreneurship. So yeah.
For sure, yeah, it is easy to like get caught up in just uni, like school, uni work, internships, interviews, and stuff like that. So I totally get it. You were so like, let's talk about the stuff that you founded a bit more. So ReShape, that was like Gen Z consulting, stuff like that. Like, how did that come about, and what do you do there?
Yeah, awesome. So like I mentioned, the pandemic came about, and unfortunately, several businesses were, seen losing crazy amounts of revenue, and also like the cash flow situation was just so tight. And I saw in the place that I was in at the time, sort of most of the businesses were at risk of bankruptcy within the next 6 months. The SME was like sort of the primary driver of that economy, right? And that to me struck a chord, because these are businesses that I grew up with. How can I sort of watch them fail? And that's when we sort of jumped into, I reached out to a few of my friends, and then like we came together. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the co-founders. We've got Janvi Javeri, Anuj Kejriwal, Gokul Prem, and Sheen Garib. So these, shout out to you guys. You owe me for that paid plug. But anyways, sort of just had the opportunity to come together with these amazing people who had, slightly better backgrounds in consulting than myself. I had zero exposure in consulting. But we did that, and then we were able to quickly interview several people and filter through several hundred candidates, because at the time, if you remember, a lot of internships were getting canceled as well all around the world. So we were just there at the right time, sort of the bridge for businesses, bridge for university students as well. And essentially, we were able to support businesses with go-to-market solutions, with revenue recovery, digital transformation, and most things, branding and marketing and things like that. So we were definitely able to help save some jobs and sort of help businesses pivot to more, digital friendly environments, I would say. And we are continuing to do so as well as ReShape Go. It's a model that we've seen proven out in North America, and it's what we want to do is essentially be the leader for that in the EMEA region. And that's definitely something that we're on track to do. Yeah.
So you started that when you were also in uni, right?
I was the only one in uni. Yeah.
Oh, the only one. Okay. So how did you get your first clients? Like,
oh yeah, this is the fun thing, right? Like a lot of people say, like, oh, you have to go out and validate your ideas. Like, but the thing is, I knew that the businesses were struggling. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. So I just literally texted 5 different founders and asked them, hey, would you be willing to sort of take on this help kind of a thing? Would you be willing to sort of trust us to support you? Because obviously the more expensive consulting companies are not going to be the ones that they're going to be looking to hire. And they couldn't afford it at the time. And perhaps they didn't know that they needed the help either. Because when you're in the SME category, especially on the lower ends of it, sometimes you don't really see what the hell consultants do or whatever. So I was able to convince 5 people. And then on the consultant side, I was able to convince 20 people. And we put together those small teams. And then we started out like that. All of a sudden, once we put out our first post, I think I had a few conversations with the MD of Microsoft for Startups, and then Microsoft for Startups got behind us. And now we're doing a project with the founder of Shazam. So very, very cool things are happening, I guess. And it's just about, being persistent, I would say. It's oftentimes very easy to think that we are underestimated as Gen Z. And I think we are massively, but that's going to change. And we want to be a leader in that.
That's awesome. So yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't know, including myself, don't really know what consulting means. I mean, obviously I know about it, but what do you guys actually do? I mean, do you just advise companies on their decisions and the strategies and stuff like that?
Yeah. So let me just break it down a little bit for you. So we have sort of an introductory call with a client, talking about their problems that they're facing. Look at sort of our capacity restraints as well. How much can we help them when we're helping 30 plus other companies? and sort of say, in the matter of 6 weeks, these are the different things that we can sort of propose as strategy sort of solutions or advice on strategy that people can take to improve their offerings. So let's break it down into, the basic thing of branding, right? For most people, it might just seem like, oh, it's like Instagram posts, or it's just like, something very, very superficial. But then really at its core, you have to think about like visual languages. You have to think about like the different color patterns that you're going to use, on the consistency in which you're posting, and the times at which you're posting at, or like the kind of, you want to adopt paid marketing or unpaid marketing. Like, what are the pros and cons of each thing, and how does it weigh up for your business? And like, how does it tie into your needs? Like, these are different considerations that a lot of businesses often tend to skip over, I think. And, before all of this, I would probably say consultants were glorified presentation makers. But then after this, I've seen like, a lot of sort of detailed work go in behind the scenes on the research front, especially into the industries that these companies are operating in. And we were doing them globally. So it was really, really interesting to, meet so many different people and understand different countries and geographies and see how that plays out into their various strategies. So, yeah.
Awesome. So let's talk about CrowdPad. Is that sort of like your newest thing?
Yeah. And yeah, it is sort of, I guess, my baby. So it's something that we've kind of come up with over the past few months, essentially been working on it for some time now. But it's initially it was sort of the social crowdfunding app kind of thing. And then we sort of pivoted away from that because what we realized was that it might be an inefficient use of capital. Let's say you raise a pre-seed round of like 150,000, and 100,000 of that would go into sort of regulatory and compliance and all of this kind of stuff. And you're left with £50,000 to prove that your concept works. And then someone who's coming to you as opposed to a seeders is like, what guarantee do I have that, I'm going to get funded when you don't have as much of a customer base? So that's where we saw the main problem. And we're like, okay, there's definitely something wrong with that. And then we sort of pivoted away into sort of like the social media for startups kind of a thing. We thought it might be important to build up critical mass on a platform before, even considering fundraising on our platform. And then we had onboarded this amazing developer on our team, and he sort of threw this idea of blockchain to us. And it was more around the notion of sort of smart contracts for fulfilling kind of, whenever you're crowdfunding, for instance, you have a £100,000 campaign. Let's say between the day which you start the campaign and the day you end the campaign, money is usually held in kind of escrow or something like that. Instead, this would be on smart contracts. That was kind of the proposition. And then I kind of like, YouTubed blockchain for the first time, and then like cryptocurrency, and then sort of just went down this rabbit hole, which was never ending. But that is when we sort of decided to become a tokenized social media platform for entrepreneurs. And then, just sort of capture this early stage value chain, tokenizing all of these things, and just testing this hypothesis out. If you ask me today, which startup experts want to be paid in tokens, or which companies want to receive tokens and all of that kind of stuff, I probably won't have the best answer for you. But I do think that it's one of those things where you have to introduce the hypothesis for people to realize the need for it. So yeah, that's kind of a bit about the journey of CrowdPad. My CTO is a good friend of mine from high school, and she's currently just wrapping up her placement year at IBM. And my my lead developer is from Munich. And my UX and brand person is actually one of the similar businesses to ReShape he founded. It's called Pali Hill Group. So he was a founder of that. So to name them, Drishti, Chawla, Harman Vasi, and Sham Shatwani, you guys also owe me money now. So I gotta make that bread, right? So yeah, that's the team.
Totally, we all do. Yeah. So you raised funding for that, right? How did that happen? What's the process like? I'm sure that's something that a lot of people want to learn a bit more about.
Yeah, I think what we need to realize is for early stage businesses, especially founders that lack credibility, I see, think about it from a venture capital point of view. You're investing in a 20-something founder, and, you're sort of expecting them to bring you probably 30-fold returns or whatever it is, kind of like, until exit, essentially. You see them as a founder that can take you to IPO or can give you a big exit. Can you see that in a 20-something-year-old? Possibly not on the very first go. So you got to think about different ways to get credibility going for you, get that momentum rolling. Because otherwise you're just building when really, you're not able to get these sort of vanity things in the way which can show other people that what you're building matters. I think oftentimes people say vanity metrics and things like that don't matter. Sure, they don't matter to you as the core of your business, but they do matter to the public and for people to get involved, I guess. And that's when we sort of came across various accelerators, and we were just like, we got to have a little bit of cash to sort of keep ourselves going, because I've graduated now and I don't want to sort of rely on my family for sort of, as a means to sort of fund myself or anything like that. And I think that's sort of when we kind of jumped into the pool of, we need to find a way to raise some money. And I think we got that in the form of LSE Generates Accelerator Program. It's been such a fantastic journey so far. We had about £5,000 in equity-free capital, kind of a thing. And we also had £15,000 worth of credits for various different services, including Seed Legals and Slack, Notion, etc. All of these things are tools that we use on a day-to-day basis, and they sort of add up. So it's definitely super useful. Now we're able to invest in tech, invest in whatever it is that we need to, like, for example, if it's building a token, then we need to pay for that, and like storage on the blockchain. Like, you think these things are cheap, like, but for example, on Ethereum, it costs like $2 million to save up to 5 GB or something like that, right? And for the one we're using, we're using Solana, I believe. It's a lot cheaper than that, but essentially, that's at a lower storage rate. Once that ramps up, we'll see those costs picking up too. So for now, we're fine, I would say. But then, and our focus is to build and show traction before going around for fundraising or whatever it is. But yeah, that's sort of where we're at right now. And that was kind of the process. We went through, I think, about 100 startups or 110 startups that sort of applied to the same program. And I think about 12 of them were selected, and we were lucky enough to be one of the 12.
Wow, nice. That's really, really awesome. So how, like, what's sort of been the biggest challenge that comes to mind with CrowdPad that you faced?
Yeah.
Like any learning curves or?
So I would say I'm a non-technical person, like from a non-technical background, right? So I guess in the initial days, I was super insecure about the tech side, because I was just like, okay, you're the tech person, you do the tech thing. Like, that was sort of the attitude. But I think increasingly I've just sort of, thrown that away, because I think you need to dive deeper into sort of these fears that we face as founders, because otherwise it just becomes an overlooked kind of area, and then it'll lead to your eventual like failure. So I think insecurity on the tech front was definitely one of the biggest challenges for me. But increasingly I've sort of like, looked at the various things that go about different layers of the blockchain, and like, understanding what crypto actually is, as opposed to what most people see it right now as this, volatile speculation kind of asset class, essentially, but really understanding why people think that it is this fundamental thing that's going to change our lives and all of that kind of stuff. So really getting the opportunity to understand the technicals behind that and why that is to be true was really, really insightful. And another challenge, I guess, would be sort of juggling all of this with university. I guess it was such a hard thing to do, because I think it's easy when you see it on a resume to see, oh yeah, he did this, blah, blah. Okay, great. But then in reality, you are sort of juggling like, modules at a great institution, like with a significant rigor. And sometimes I think I texted all of my professors I emailed all of my professors saying, hey, we got into the accelerator. And then literally one of them had to reply to me, Joel, don't forget to study for your finals. And I was just like, yeah, thanks guys. I know you got my back. But literally, I think it's so important to have that supportive ecosystem, and it's so easy to give up. I guess that's the final hardest thing. And just persisting in those times, I think, is so important.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I when I came back to South Africa, I got a job. When I was in London, I was working as a real estate agent. And so when I came back to South Africa, I got a job with Sotheby's Realty. And I was also doing uni at the same time. Fortunately, it was online, so it made it like a little bit easier. But it was really hard doing everything online, the lectures, the essays, the projects, presentations, everything, and at the same time having the demand of a full-time job. But I managed, but it was a heavy workload.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what kind of, I always ask this to everyone that we have on. So what kind of advice do you have to a first-time founder? Maybe they're in university or they've just graduated, someone who's looking to start up their own company. Like, what kind of general advice would you give to them?
Well, if you were in university, I would say always start with the nonprofit. I think that's sort of the way to go. I know it sort of beats the notion of building $1 billion company on your very first go, but that never happens. I'm so sorry to say, unless you're, I guess, Mark Zuckerberg. But even he also had failed ventures before he sort of jumped into this. But yeah, what I'm trying to say is entrepreneurship doesn't help you make money, I guess. Like, to be very frank, like not in the first few years. Definitely, it's not as rewarding as people think on the monetary front. So I think working for a nonprofit helped me realize that I would do this even just as long as, the person on the other end is able to benefit and like you can see the tangible impact of your work on their life. It's why I didn't want to do banking, because you're on one end of a transaction and you've prepared a deck for them. You've run the financials. But let's say Unilever did a deal with like some bank, and then they're not going to know who the hell the analyst was. Like, and they don't care about that. That wasn't important to the deal happening or whatever it is. Like in retrospect, at least, sort of on the big headlines, that's not what matters. Whereas if you think about like a child or a university student that we've placed in a university now, they're always going to remember that, like you were there to help them when virtually they did not have as much support from their existing ecosystem. And I think that's so powerful. And being able to change the trajectory of someone's life, is so huge. And I don't take that lightly, and I'm not like bragging or anything like that. But I think that it was just something very meaningful to do to begin with, and realize that money is not the only thing that sort of, drives work, that delivers value. And obviously that comes from a place of privilege where you can sort of afford to work on like a nonprofit and things like that. Oftentimes you find yourselves having to work part-time jobs, which pay you so that you can pay rent and all of those things. So definitely it's got to be something like that, do a nonprofit or work for a founder, do part-time jobs with startups essentially, so that, you can get paid and at the same time you can get great startup exposure. It's got to be one of those things. I don't think the first venture you build will be the wonder.
For sure, yeah, I think that's really good for people to know. Like, going into entrepreneurship or founding a company doesn't mean that you're going to be a billionaire within the next 6 months. I mean, you don't really even get paid, do you, until you exit or it's big enough to like pay dividends or something like that.
Yeah.
So, that's definitely true. And doing meaningful work is also super important. I mean, even like in the real estate thing, like you actually play such a huge role in somebody buying a house and moving into a new part of their life, that they'll always remember you. And it's so cool to see people happy and moving in there and stuff. And obviously you get commissions. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So Joel, we've been going for almost half an hour. I just have one last question for you. Yeah. Do you have like any big business inspiration, or is there any like founder, Elon Musk or someone that you really look up to, and why?
Oh, this is a hard one.
Or not.
I think,
or any inspiration in general.
I would say failures are actually the biggest teachers. And that's sort of my sort of key takeaway, at least. All of these great founders have done great things, but I prefer to look at the times in which things weren't going so great for them and what they did when their back was against the wall, right? I think those are the things that you look at when you have to see the resilience of founders. Not the glorified moments on Twitter and on TechCrunch, because those are the highs, and the lows are significantly worse. So, I have to think about, I say I don't want to sort of rely on my folks for money. Then I have to worry about where's my rent coming from in September. I have to think about things like that, which is not like, you have all these big startup challenges that you think about, but think about personal challenges that, you have as founders too. It's not an easy journey. And I would say taking inspiration from people's toughest moments and seeing what they did in those moments, I think that's when you learn the most.